Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. You're talking about it today. I'm your host, Mo Spiegel. We're live in Atlanta, Georgia, and my guest today, he is New York Times best-selling author. He's the winner of the 2001 NAACP Image Award for Outstanding Literature and Fiction, as well as the 2006 Phyllis Wheatley Literary Award, and a host of other things. He's a graduate of Howard University. He's made his strides in the literary world and now venturing into films, children's books, and a number of other things. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome my guest for today, Omar Tyree. What's up, man?
Hey, what's poppin', dude?
Hey, man, you the guy that's popping, man. You got a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get into the music field, man. I started writing music again, so it's movies and music. That's what I'm working on right now. Okay,
movies and music. So now you've accomplished a lot of things in the literary world, and you know, a lot of people may look at you and say, hey, man, I would love to know how I can be what you have become. Right. First half of this show, I want to talk about some of the books you've written before we get into your latest book, The Equation of Life, because I think that's a phenomenal read as well. But what does someone need to find inspiration within or be motivated to become, in your opinion?
Well, for the most part, you can go to my website at omartyree.com. That's OmarTyree.com. And I have a consultation course that I'm now offering to people who want to get into the publishing field because there's so many people who want to write books. But typically, as an artist or as an entrepreneur, you just got to go ahead and do it. You know what I mean? It's not about thinking about it all the time. It's not about preparing for it. You got to go ahead and put your foot in the door and kick the door open. But I do have a consultation at my website for everybody that wants to figure out how to get in with experience, because I have all the experience in the world in the publishing industry. But when you talk about inspiration, there's no inspiration stronger than a person's desire to do it.
Okay, your desire to do it. And let's say if somebody's at home right now and they're they say, well, I have the desire, but you know, it just seems like it's not happening for me. Because you was on a journey for a while, and I read some stuff about you recently that I didn't know, and I've known you for quite some time. But what was your journey like to becoming Omar Tyree, as opposed to the young guy born and raised in Philadelphia? Talk to us a little bit about that movement from becoming that little guy who had dreams and aspirations of becoming a writer, a musician, a film director, to who you have come today, so that somebody else that may not know the right channels or the right things to do, because oftentimes we give people a lot of different advice, but it's nothing like knowing, okay, these are some of the steps that I really took when I had an idea versus how I got that idea to come to fruition. So give us a little bit of insight on your journey from the little guy in Philly to who you've become today.
Well, I've never looked at myself as a little guy, number one. I always thought, I had some big things to offer, so that little guy thing was not the case with me. I always had pretty much a big head. And you have to start off that way. You got to have confidence in what you do. You can be humble and all of that, but whenever you put your name on a product and expect to sell it, you better have swagger behind that too. So it was pretty easy for me coming out of Howard University, because there wasn't a lot of authors at that time. We had a lot of people who were writing Afrocentric books who had PhD degrees and master's degrees, but there wasn't a lot of people writing African-American fiction, particularly contemporary fiction. And so I really had competition with only a few people. Terry McMillan was out at the time, Walter Mosley was out, B.B. Moore Campbell, and a few other authors. And so I didn't have much competition when I came out, so I went straight to a lot of expo events. I bought table booths, and I just put my books in the black bookstores. And at the time, it wasn't a lot of young people. In fact, I was a baby in the bunch at 22, 23 years old. So a lot of people bought my content just looking at me being a young man who decided to do it. And then once I got momentum rolling, it just kept rolling, and the name grew to itself, So right now, it's just totally different. It's a lot more competition out there, a lot more people doing it. So I can't look at what I did 17 years ago and compared to what you can do now, because there's just so many authors who are trying to put books out, and the competition is fierce now. And so I just benefited from being one of the first in the industry. It's like they say in a whole lot of business propositions, it's first to market product. And my books were first to market product in the early 90s, and therefore my name was able to establish itself very early, and I just kept rocking and rolling from there.
Okay. Now, what in your dealings, because you've been doing this quite some time, man, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see aspiring authors make in trying to publish their works?
Well, for the most part, I tell them if they really want to be writers, then be writers. You got a lot of people who are on get-rich-quick schemes, and they figure they're going to write 1 or 2 books and blow up. And that's not, you know what I mean, the real generation of writers. If you want to write and have a lot of ideas, continue to write, and it may be your 4th or 5th book that blows up, but that is a career. And so a lot of times we have people that just write 1 or 2 books, and I always wanted to put a book out that is great, but they actually get in the way of real writers because it confuses the audience where they find just one book from an author that wanted to put one out, or they find a book from a real established author who wants to be in the writing game. So it's almost like being a musician who just wants to put out a single versus a person who wants to have an album and a career of albums, plural. And so, like I tell people all the time, if you want to really be a writer, then be a writer for serious games and not just trying to get in there and get money real quick and become rich and famous on some New York Times bestsellers list, because that's not what writers were doing when I came out in the early 90s. We all wanted to be writers. We all had something to say, and we all have careers that are more than 5 and 6 and 7 books. You know, a lot of us have 12 and 15 books out there. So that's people that's really into what their craft is. And so I would just advise folks, if you really want to get in this game, then be serious about it.
Right. Now, and two, in doing that, how, when you mentioned New York Times bestseller, how tough is it for an author these days to make that New York Times bestseller list? And what are the things you have to do as an author to get on that list?
You got to write what the people want, and it has to be published in a way in which people can get to it, and they spread the word on it. It's really no formula. It's all about the people liking what you have to offer, bottom line. I hit the New York Times bestsellers list when I put out a sequel book to my most popular book. The people really wanted it. I put out T-shirts. I put out flyers. I pushed the book months in advance, and when the book hit, man, it hit hard, and I ended up climbing all the way up to number 14 in the whole country for the fiction books, and so that was a phenomenal occurrence. And from there, I had 3 more New York Times bestsellers, but there's no real formula. You just have to figure out what the people want, put it out there, and market it real hard, and hope that it hits. For African Americans, generally, though, most of them hit the Essence bestsellers list, which is the Essence magazine. A lot of them are able to hit that list. The New York Times bestsellers list, that's just a lot bigger. You got to sell a lot more books, and that's just a lot harder to do. And then you have the USA Today list, which I've never even made the USA Today list. That's even harder than the New York Times list, because now you're competing with paperback books, mass market books, and they just glob all the books together. When I hit the New York Times, they separate fiction from nonfiction. When you hit the USA Today, they just glob all of them in there together. Children's books, illustration books, everything, nonfiction, fiction, black, white, Asian, everything. And so if you hit the U.S. Times or USA Today list, you really did something. And so recently, of course, what's the brother's name? Steve Harvey hit that list real big, you know what I mean? So it's just about giving the people what they want, man. There's no steady formula. If you can come up with something that works, God bless you, and make it happen.
Man, we got some questions in the chat room that we're going to ask you. If you got questions for Omar Tyree, you can log into the chat room and ask those questions, or you can call us up at 347-826-7120 and ask your question. Here's a question here in the chat room from a listener. It says, at what age did you write your first article or story?
First article or story, I would have to go back to age 17. I had a assignment for English in high school, and that was my best one at age 17.